welcoming friends. Whether you just got here, you've been lurking quietly in the background, or you're settling in with something warm in your hands. I'm really glad you're here. This is Pawsitive News, and like always, this is just a place to sit for a little while. No urgency, no pressure to react to anything, no need to keep up with the noise outside this space. Everything moves fast out there. Timelines scroll, headlines stack, notifications pile up on top of each other until it starts to feel like one long blur. And sometimes you don't even realize how much you're carrying until you finally stop moving long enough to notice it. So that's what this is. A pause. Not a dramatic one, not a big reset button, just a small pocket of time where we can slow things down a little and look at what's happening between the spaces, between all the loud stuff. The quiet moments, the human moments, the things that don't always get spotlighted but still matter. We got stories to sit with. Some warm, some a little strange, some that just make you tilt your head and go, he's making us read that. The kind of stories that don't demand your attention. They just invite it. And you can take them however you need to. Let them wash over you. Let them sit beside you. Let them just exist in the background while you breathe for a second. No rush. Just ease into it together. It's easy. Now, to start us off, let's take it over to Tuck Serb with This Week in History.
Thanks, Odie.
Serb, why is there a body outline here?
Let's see what happened this week in history. On February 22nd, 1980, the United States defeats the Soviet Union in what becomes known as the Miracle on Ice. According to International Olympic Committee records and Associated Press Olympic coverage from the time, a U.S. hockey team made up mostly of college players faced a heavily favored Soviet squad that had dominated international hockey for years. It wasn't supposed to be close, and yet, in Lake Placid, it was. The U.S. won 4-3 in a game that became one of the most iconic moments in Olympic sports history. Not just for the score, but for what it represented in particular at that moment in time.
What sport was that again?
Iced hockey?
Yeah, we're going to tell Panda he should reconsider his ice hockey tips.
He really should.
To a bunch of Canadians.
February 27th, 1991, a Gulf War ceasefire is declared. A document in the U.S. National Archives timeline and reported by BBC News at the time, coalition forces announced a suspension of offensive operations after weeks of conflict following Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. The ceasefire marked a turning point, the active combat phase ending after a short but intense period of fighting. For many families watching from home, it meant something simple and immediate: movement towards quiet. February 22nd, 1732, we're going way back.
That was the year Serb was born.
No, that was the year George Washington was born. Library of Congress records and Mount Vernon archives document the birth of the man who would become the first president of the United States, long before the office had precedent. Long before traditions were set, there was simply a leader navigating something new. Whatever your lens on history, that date marked the beginning of a chapter that secured the structure of a nation. Shaped. February 24th, 2008, Fidel Castro resigns as president of Cuba. BBC News and Associated Press International Reporting documented the announcement after nearly 5 decades of leadership. It marked the end of an era that had defined Cuban politics for generations and shifted the country into a new phase of governance under Raúl Castro. And February 28, 1953, James Watson and Francis Crick announced the discovery of the double helix structure of DNA. Nature Journal archives in the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History preserve the moment when the structure underlying genetic inheritance was formally described. That announcement reshaped biology, medicine, and our understanding of how life replicates and evolves. But different fields, different impacts. Sports arenas, battlefields, laboratories, political offices, but all within the same handful of days on the calendar. History doesn't move in straight lines, it moves in moments, some loud, some quiet, some instantly recognized as monumental. Others understood more fully years later. And every week, the calendar quietly reminds us how much has unfolded before we've ever arrived. And now back to Serb for Global Good Vibes. Thanks, Serb. Alright, let's ease into this one.
Well, I'm still wondering about this chalk outline. Can you explain the bloody knife in your sink?
First, we're heading to Maui. After the 2023 wildfires tore through parts of the island, families weren't just separated from homes. Many were separated from their pets. In the chaos of evacuations, animals slipped fences, bolted in fear, or were left behind temporarily with the hope of returning quickly. According to the reporting from Associated Press and updates from the Hawaii Humane Society, volunteers mobilized almost immediately. Rescue teams searched burn zones once it was safe. They scanned microchips, set up temporary shelters. They photographed animals and shared images online so families could search through listings. Reunions didn't always happen right away. Some took days, some took weeks. Volunteers coordinated transportation across the island to reconnect animals with their people. And slowly, amid so much loss, there were moments of recognition. A tail wag, a familiar voice, someone dropping to their knees as a dog ran towards them. It didn't undo the fire. It didn't ease grief. But in the middle of devastation, people chose to look for what could still be brought back together. Next, let's shuffle to something a little different. Reuters covered student engineering teams designing low-cost solar lamps for communities without reliable electricity. In many off-grid regions, once the sun goes down, daily life narrows, homework becomes difficult, clinics struggle to operate, families rely on kerosene lamps that are costly and hazardous. So students stepped in with a practical idea: build affordable solar-powered lamps using accessible materials. Lightweight, durable, easy to repair. Designed specifically for communities where infrastructure is limited. Some of these initiatives have been supported or highlighted by NGOs working alongside organizations like UNICEF to help distribute lighting in rural areas. It's not flashy technology, it's not complicated, it's simply light that lasts past sunset. Light that lets a student finish reading, light that reduces indoor air pollution from fuel lamps, light that extends the day just enough to make a difference. Sometimes progress looks like innovation. And sometimes it looks like listening carefully to a need and responding with something simple. And then on to Florida. The Florida Keys have experienced significant coral loss over the past several years due to disease, warming waters, and storm damage. Entire reef systems have struggled. But according to NOAA and Associated Press reporting, large-scale coral restoration projects are beginning to show early signs of recovery. Restoration teams grow corals underwater in underwater nurseries, suspended structures where fragments can mature in protected conditions. Once they're strong enough, divers outplant them into damaged reefs, and many of the coral selected are more resilient varieties grown from fragments that survived previous stress events. It's meticulous work. Divers carefully secure each coral reef to structures by hand. Growth takes time. Monitoring continuous reefs over long planting periods. And now, early signs show young corals attaching and surviving. Some reef areas are beginning to show increased marine activity. It's not full recovery, and challenges remain, but there are measurable indicators the restoration efforts are helping stabilize certain sections, and that matters. So, today we have volunteers reuniting pets with their families after fire, students building solar lamps so communities can study and work safely after dark, scientists restoring coral ecosystems piece by piece. None of these stories pretend the original problem didn't happen, but each one shows people choosing to respond patiently, practically, and with care. And sometimes, in the middle of hard things, that steady response is what carries everything forward. Thank you, and now on to Odie for the bright side.
Let's sit with something small and human for a minute.
Oh shit, maybe we actually might want to call someone.
A winter storm hit hard enough to shut down roads and strand drivers for hours. Cars stuck on icy highways, people running low on gas. No easy way to leave, no clear timeline for when things would move again. According to reporting carried by the Associated Press and local news coverage, a restaurant owner and staff realized pretty quickly that the storm wasn't just inconvenient. It had turned into a situation where people were stuck without food and water. So instead of closing up and heading home, they shifted gears. They prepared and started handing out meals to stranded motorists. No charge, no register open, just food going out the door to anyone who needed it. Staff walked through the cold, slipping between cars and along the roadside, passing out warm meals to drivers who'd been sitting there for hours. Some people had been stuck in their vehicles most of the day. Others were trying to figure out where they'd sleep if the road didn't clear, and suddenly at their windows offering something to eat. It wasn't a big coordinated relief. It wasn't a headlining moment. Just a kitchen that happened to be nearby, a team that realized they had food and there were people who needed it, and a simple decision to stay open long enough to help. In interviews, the owner made it clear they weren't trying to make money off a captive crowd. The goal was just to make a rough situation a little easier for people who hadn't planned on it. Staff kept cooking as long as they had ingredients. Drivers accepted meals with that particular kind of gratitude that shows up when someone didn't have to help, but did anyway. Eventually the storm moved on. Roads cleared. People got to where they were going. But for a stretch of time, in the middle of the cold and uncertainty, there was a place where the lights stayed on, and the food kept coming out, simply because somebody decided it should. And that's enough. These moments don't fix the storm, but they make wading through it a little easier. Now, with some stone science this week, let's head over to the Professor Tuxer.
Cops are on their way. Thanks, Odie. Alright, let's slow this one
I
down.
just came out of your bathroom, and I understand the cops are on the way, but what's this canister of wipes labeled chloroform?
Let's slow this one down just a little and check in with some science that feels quietly hopeful. First up, not biodegradable plastic. Prosthetic limbs that can let users feel things again. For a long time, prosthetics had focused mostly on movement, grip strength, control, function, but recently, reporting from Reuters and research published in biomedical engineering journals has been following systems that go a step further. Reconnecting prosthetics to the nervous system so users can sense temperature and texture. Here's the idea. In simple terms, sensors in the prosthetic pick up information like whether something is warm, cool, smooth, rough. That information gets translated into signals that stimulate nerves in the residual limb. And then in time, the brain can learn to interpret those signals as sensation coming from the missing hand or arm, which means someone can tell if a mug is hot before it's too late. They can feel how tightly they're holding something. They can recognize the texture instead of just guessing what grade of sandpaper. It's still developing technology and it takes time for users to adapt, but early trials have shown that people can learn to interpret these signals surprisingly well. And beyond the practical benefits, there's something deeper there. restoring a sense that interaction with the world isn't just visual or mechanical, but physical again. Not perfect, not fully widespread yet, but from a real step forward, prosthetics that feel more integrated with the body instead of separate from it. I like the idea of this biomimicry business. It's interesting. Now, for the second story, material scientists working on plastics that don't stick around forever. BBC and material science research teams have been covering new biodegradable plastics designed to break down in seawater. Unlike traditional plastics that linger for decades or fragment into microplastics, these new polymer formulations are built to decompose in marine environments within weeks under the right conditions. That's the key phrase. Under the right conditions. Temperature, water movement, thickness of the material all affects how quickly something breaks down. So this isn't a magic switch where plastic suddenly disappears overnight. But the goal is to create materials that if they do end up in the ocean, won't remain there for generations. In testing environments, some of these plastics can degrade without leaving behind harmful residues, which is one of the biggest challenges researchers are trying to solve. Because it's not just about breaking down, it's about breaking down safely. Using massive chemicals to break something down is another way of breaking something down. But again, it's early. Scaling production, cost, durability, all of that still has to be worked out. But it's a direction. A shift towards materials with an exit plan instead of permanence. So, today's science check-in is pretty grounded. Engineers working to give people back a sense of touch, researchers designing materials that don't outstay their welcome in the ocean, not flashy breakthroughs that change everything overnight, just steady steps towards making daily life a little safer, a little more connected, and a little less harmful over time. And sometimes that kind of progress is the kind that lasts. So, here's to Odie for gaming history.
This canister says kills on it.
Thank you, sir, for that awesome take in stone science. Alright, let's take a little walk back to the mid-90s. The original Game Boy had already been out for years. A big gray brick, tank-level durability, survived drops, road trips, and probably at least one backpack incident involving loose batteries in the sandwich. But in 1996, Nintendo released something quieter, something refined, the Game Boy Pocket.
I remember them.
According to Nintendo's own hardware timeline and archival references preserved by institutions like the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, the Game Boy Pocket wasn't a brand new console generation. It was a redesign. Slimmer, lighter, cleaner lines, smaller footprint, and one major quality of life improvement. An improved reflective screen that made the display noticeably cleaner than the original pea soup tint people were used to. Dates me. Also ditched the 4 AA battery setup and ran on 2 AAA batteries instead, which made it lighter in your hands and a little easier to travel with. It could fit in Serb's back pocket. And that matters more than just it sounds like. Because handheld gaming isn't just about what you play, it's about where you play. The Pocket made the system feel less like a chunk of hardware and more like something you could actually slip into a jacket and forget about until you needed it. It didn't scream new era. It quietly made an old era better. And then something else happened during that same window of time. Pokemon's Red and Blue launched internationally during the Game Boy Pocket era.
Oh, I remember.
Nintendo's release history and later BBC News retrospectives have documented just how massive that moment was. Not just for the Pokemon as a franchise, but for Game Boy itself. Because by 1996, the original Game Boy hardware was just technically going. Other systems were out, color screens were on the horizon. On paper, it might have looked like handheld gaming was due for a shift.
Weed was really, really good too.
Instead, Pokemon extended the life of the system in a way almost nobody could have ever predicted. Kids brought linked cables to school, trading at lunch tables. Playground rumors spread like wildfire. Mew is under the truck. My cousin has all 151. Entire friend groups negotiating who was picking red, who was picking blue. I picked red.
Blue.
Of course he would. It's the color of his balls. Like beach balls.
Grapefruits.
His mini grapefruits. They're called kumquats. Contemporary gaming press at the time documented how Pokemon drove hardware sales, pushing Game Boy units long after many expected the platform to fail. The Pocket redesign helped for sure. It refreshed the hardware. It made it feel current again. But Pokemon made it cultural. The combination of slimmer hardware and a game built around connection, literal cable-based connection, created something sticky, something portable and personal, and social at the same time. And again, that's why I love that era for a reason. I just gave you several. No backlit screens yet, no Wi-Fi, no online matchmaking. Just a small reflective display. A cartridge clicked into place, and the quiet confidence that somewhere nearby someone else was holding the same device. The Game Boy Pocket didn't reinvent handheld gaming. It redefined it. And Pokemon didn't just sell cartridges, it sold memories. It gave the second wind to a system that it needed. One that carried it through the rest of the decade and locked Game Boy into gaming history permanently. Small redesign, simple monster catching concept, massive cultural ripple. Sometimes that's all it takes. Now, with our pause for thought, Unky Serb.
Corporate's gonna kill you for going off script. Thanks, Odie.
Okay, you gotta help me out here. Why is there a vat of acid and clothes beside it?
Let's sit here for a minute. Sometimes things go sideways. Plans fall apart. Storms roll through. Literal ones. Emotional ones. The kind that just show up at your door and whisk you away without warning. And rearrange everything for a while. And in those moments, it's really easy to focus on what went wrong. What didn't go how it was supposed to. What got lost, what got delayed, and what didn't turn out the way you pictured it. But that's a normal reaction. There's nothing wrong with noticing the hard parts. But every now and then, if you look just a little longer, something else starts to show up too. Not instead of the hard thing, not erasing it, just alongside it. A small thing. A steady thing. A moment that didn't fix everything, but helped. Sometimes it's someone staying a little later than they had to. Sometimes it's a message that arrives at the right time. Sometimes it's realizing something didn't go how you planned, but it's also didn't end the way you feared. Makes sense? Those are grand sweeping victories. They're not dramatic turning points. They're just small pieces of light that show up in your places where you weren't expecting them. And the strange part is, once you start noticing them, you realize how they've probably been there the whole time. Not loudly, not demanding attention, just waiting to be seen when you're ready to see them. And you don't have to ignore the difficult stuff to notice something good sitting next to it. Both can exist at the same time. Both can be true. And maybe that's enough for now. Just keeping an eye out for the small, steady things that make heavier moments a little easier. Thanks for listening, strays. And now on to Odie for a good night.
Alright,
We're here for the murderer! The murderer!
let's land this gently. Yeah, he's over there. If you've been sitting with us from the beginning, thank you. Chloroform's in the bathroom. And if you came in somewhere in the middle, just let it play in the background while you existed for a bit. that counts too. Tonight wasn't about pretending hard things don't happen. It wasn't about forcing optimism or polishing tough edges until they disappear. It was about looking a little closer at the pictures where something steady showed up anyways. Volunteers.
We're gonna need CSI down here.
Volunteers searching until families were reunited. I told you, he's over there. Volunteers searching until families were reunited. Students building light where they said there wasn't any. A kitchen sorry, it's distractive over here. A kitchen staying open in the middle of a storm. Researchers working quietly on better tools, better materials. A handheld console getting a second life because the right game met at the right moment. Yes, just bring the gurney through here, please. None of these stories erased the original challenge. They just added something to it. And sometimes that's the shift. Not removing the difficult part, but noticing what rose up around it. Yes, you're going to need gloves for that vat of acid there, and garbage bags for all the clothes around it. I don't know what they're for, officers. So as you head back into whatever's waiting for you, work, school, rest, noise, quiet. I think it's a little too quiet around here now.
Sir, we're gonna need to take your statement. Can you turn the equipment off, please?
You're going to have to let me finish, officer. Maybe just keep your eyes open for those small additions. The extra effort. Chat, please. I'm going to need a GoFundMe to get me out of jail. The unexpected kindness. The detail that makes something heavy feel a little lighter. Fuck, put that away. Let me finish. Not everything needs to be dramatic to the matter. Sometimes it's just enough to pause.
Drop the Tim Hortons.
It's over there.
Okay, give me the
And
donuts.
notice.
Give me the donuts.
Thanks for spending this time here. We'll see you next week.
You're going down.